Hello, my amazing students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're doing lesson 56, all about ratio and proportion. And we know a little bit about ratios, or we should by now, but let's review ratios. A ratio is a comparison. And we can write ratios several different equivalent ways. We could write 3 to 4, which is a fraction, or 3 to 4, or 3 with a colon and 4, and all of these mean exactly the same thing. They're all ratios of 3 to 4. Now, sometimes equivalent ratios are in different forms and not simplified. Can you see that 3 to 4 and 6 to 7 are the same value? 6 divided by 8 is the same as 3 divided by 4 when I divide the top and the bottom by 2. Okay, now 15 and 20 will simplify to 3 over 4 when I divide the top and the bottom by 5. And 90 over 120 will go to 3 over 4 if I divide by 30 on the top and the bottom. So those are equivalent forms of the same ratio. Now, when we set two ratios equal to each other, we call this a proportion. Now, this one happens to be a true proportion because 3/4 is equal to 6/8. But I could also write a false proportion by simply changing the 6 to a 5, and then it would not be a true statement. Okay, so that is a false proportion, but it's still a proportion, just a false one. I'm going to leave this one in its true state, though. I'm going to put the 6 back there. So 3/4 over is equal to 6/8 is a true proportion. And the way we can check to see whether a proportion is true or false is by cross products. Okay, sometimes you call it cross multiplication. Across an equal sign, I have a fraction equal to a fraction. This cool trick always works. If the proportion is true, then the cross products will equal. So what I do is I take the 3 times the 8, and 3 times 8 is 24. And then I take the 6 times the 4, and 6 times 4 is 24. If the cross products are equal, then my proportion is a true proportion. Okay, now sometimes we use proportions to solve for an unknown number like x. And this is called a conditional proportion. We cannot say it's true or false because its truth will depend on what we replace x with. Okay, so we're going to use our cross products again to solve the conditional probability. So here we go. We have 20 over 15 is 4 over x. We're going to multiply 20 times x is 20x. And 15 times 4 is 60. So if I want to get the x by itself, don't I need to divide by 20 and divide by 20 on both sides? And 60 divided by 20 is 3. So let's replace the x with a 3 and let's check it. Okay, so 20 times 3 is 60. And 4 times 15 is 60. And since the two cross products are now equal, we know this is a true proportion here. Okay, so here is another example that's given to you. And we need to find out in this conditional proportion, we need to find out what is the value of p. So we're going to multiply 4 times 7 is 28. 5 times p is 5p. Oh, this one's not going to be pretty, is it? Because we're going to get a fraction that does not simplify, but we're trying to get p, so we divide by 5. We divide by 5, and the answer is p is 28 over 5. Now 28 over 5 does not simplify, but we can turn it into a mixed number. What would it be as a mixed number? 28 divided by 5 is 5. That gives me 25 with 3/5 left over. So 5 3/5 would be the answer, or we could leave it 28/5. So now we're going to go to a new concept and then do some practices. Oops, I just found that I had a 56 up here, but we're really on lesson 57. 57 is about ratio and proportion, and now we're talking about p raised to the q power, and the p being underneath here, we're taking a root, a qth root. So that sounds really complicated, but it's really not once you see it. So these are some things we're already familiar with. We know that we can take the cubic root of p if p is 8, because the cubic root of 8 is 2. We know that 2 cubed is 8, so the cubic root of 8 is 2. And p cubed, if p is 2, would be 2 cubed, and we know that 2 cubed is 8. So those are some things we've already learned. But now we can do problems where both things are variables. So x to the y if x is 4 and y is 3. Isn't this simply going to be a substitution? So let's just work this one real quickly right here. X to the y is the form, but now let's substitute. We're going to replace the x with a 4. So we'll take the x and make it a 4. We're going to replace the y with a 3. And now all we're talking about is 4 cubed. And 4 cubed is 4 times 4 times 4. And that is a 64. So the answer to this is going to be 64. Okay, so now let's look at another one. Evaluate the pth root of q if p is 3 and q is 64. Okay, so here's our form, p, q. So now we make our substitutions. P is 3, so I'm going to erase it and put a 3. And q is 64, so I'm going to erase it and put a 64. So now I'm talking about the cubic root of 64. And since 4 times 4 times 4 is 64, the cubic root of 64 is 4. Okay, so now we're ready to do some practice problems. We have 4 practice problems, so copy it down and use your cross products to solve for p. Pause your video. All right, so when we're solving by cross products, it's always a fraction equal to a fraction is a proportion. We don't know if it's a true one, but we can make it a true one. Right now it's a conditional one, isn't it? So 4 times 2 is 8 equals 7 times p, or 7p. To get the p by itself, we need to get rid of the 7. We divide by 7 on both sides. The 7's cancel. We get p is 8 over 7. Okay, so 8 over 7 is perfectly fine. It's an improper fraction, but that's allowed now. Or we could turn it into a mixed number, and it would be 1 1/7. But 8/7 is fine. Here is your practice number 2. So copy it down on the board and pause your video. So now we're going to find out what S is. So S times 3 is 3S. And 5 times 4 is 20. So 3S is 20. Divide by 3 to get the S by itself. Divide by 3 on the other side, because whatever we do to one side, we must do to the other. And S is 20 over 3. Okay, that's fine. 20 over 3 is perfectly okay. But let's turn it into a mixed number for practice. 20 divided by 3 goes 6 whole times. That's 18. So there's 20 minus 18 is 2. 6 2/3 would be the mixed number form, and 20 over 3 would be fine for the improper form. Now, we get to do a practice with our form x to the y. Okay, so what we're going to do is copy down our x to the y, and then we're going to prepare to erase and substitute. So remember how important having your parentheses is so that you don't get confused. X is going to be replaced with a 4, so we'll just put 4 right there. Y is going to be replaced with the 2, and we have 4 squared. Well, 4 squared is 4 times 4, and that is 16. And here is your very last practice, the last thing on lesson 57. So we have this form now, the x root of y. And then we're going to replace. If x is 4, we're going to take the x out, stick a little 4 there. If y is 16, you're going to take out the y and put in the 16. And now the fourth root of 16. What number is multiplied by itself 4 times to get 16? And the answer is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 gives us 16. That is the end of lesson 57. And this is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.